The night was supposed to feel warm and peaceful. I had cooked my signature roast chicken, the one I always made when I wanted the house to feel like home. But the moment my mother-in-law Brenda sat at our dining table, the entire atmosphere shifted. Every breath felt heavy, like the walls were preparing for a storm. Mark sat across from me with the fake smile he always wore when his mother visited. He acted relaxed, but I could see the tension hiding beneath the surface. That smile wasn't for me. It was his shield against her constant judgment. Brenda didn't waste a second before starting her usual routine. She tasted the chicken, took 2 full bites, and still found a way to say it was a little dry. She glanced at the new artwork in the hallway and called it too modern. Every comment sounded harmless, but she aimed each one like a small dart. And all Mark did was laugh softly and say, "Oh, Mom," as if her criticism was charming. For 4 years, I had learned to endure this. I told myself it was for Mark. I told myself she didn't mean any harm. But that night, something in me felt different. The air was colder, the tension sharper. I went to the kitchen to bring out the lemon tart I had prepared. While cutting slices, I heard their low voices from the dining room. Brenda's steady, pushy tone. Mark's quiet, careful replies. I didn't know the words, but I knew the rhythm. It was their usual conversation, the one they always had when they thought I wasn't listening. When I returned to the dining room with 2 plates in my hands, I stopped at the doorway. My entire body froze. Brenda was no longer sitting at the table. She was standing near the console table by the door, the place where I had set my purse, and her hand was deep inside it. Not checking, not brushing against it by accident. She was digging through it with full confidence, like she had every right to invade my privacy. But what hurt even more was Mark. He wasn't shocked. He wasn't confused. He didn't even look uncomfortable. He sat calmly in his chair, still holding his wine glass, watching her go through my belongings as if he had expected it. When he saw me standing there, his face didn't change. He just lifted the glass and took a slow sip, like nothing was wrong. The plate slipped from my hands and crashed onto the floor. The sound echoed through the room like a warning. Brenda jerked her hand out of my purse, but she was too late. She was holding my wallet. Before I could speak, she opened it. She flipped through it with practiced movements, ignoring the cash and photos and going straight to my cards. She spread them out between her fingers and examined each one as if she were checking inventory. "What are you doing?" My voice barely rose above a whisper, but the shock made it sharp. Brenda didn't look guilty. She didn't even pretend. "I was curious," she said. "A woman running a little business should stay. Responsible." I looked at Mark, hoping he would defend me, hoping he would at least act like a husband. But when he stood up, he walked toward me, not his mother. His expression was calm, too calm, and his hand on my arm felt wrong. "Let's not make a scene," he said. "Mum is just worried." Worried. That word made something inside me break. Brenda wasn't worried. She was invading my life, and Mark was letting her. Brenda lifted one specific card between her fingers. My business debit card. The account where every dollar of my hard work was kept. My independence, my dream, my security. She held it like she had discovered something important. "This one," she said. "The card for your design business. Mark told me all about your spending. I think it's time we had a family audit." The phrase sounded ridiculous, almost laughable. But the more I looked at Mark and Brenda, the more I realized this wasn't random. They weren't guessing. They weren't curious. This was planned. This was an ambush inside my own home. And in that moment, before I knew the full truth, I felt the first sharp edge of the lie my husband had been hiding from me. The room felt smaller after Brenda's words. The walls seemed to lean in, waiting to hear what I would say. For a moment, everything was silent except for the faint ticking of the clock above the dining table. I stared at the card in Brenda's hand, the one piece of my life that had nothing to do with her or Mark. It belonged entirely to me. She held it like a weapon. "What expenses, Mark?" I asked, keeping my voice steady, even though I could feel my pulse pounding in my throat. Mark didn't answer immediately. He looked at his mother, then back at me, as if deciding whose reaction mattered more. His jaw tightened for a second, the only sign that he was nervous. But he tried to hide it by adjusting his shirt collar and forcing a calm expression. "Sarah, don't make this bigger than it is," he said. "Mum just wants to help. We're a family. We should know what's going on with our finances." "Our finances?" I repeated slowly. "This is my business account. My work, my money. You don't get to spy on it." Brenda stepped closer to me, still holding my card. "A married woman shouldn't keep secrets," she said. "Carol never hides anything from her son. They make decisions together. That's how a proper family works." Her voice carried the tone of someone trying to sound wise, but I could hear the satisfaction behind it. She was enjoying this, being in control, having the upper hand. I snatched the card from her hand before she could react. She gasped, more offended by the gesture than by her own invasion. I didn't care. Something had shifted inside me, something sharp that refused to stay quiet anymore. Mark sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "Mum didn't mean anything. She thinks your spending is getting out of control." "My spending?" The words tasted bitter. "You told her about my business, about my money." He didn't look at me. That was enough of an answer. Brenda crossed her arms and added, "We're worried you're hiding financial issues. Mark said the business isn't doing as well as you claim, that your expenses are high. We thought checking your cards would clear things up." Every sentence she spoke twisted deeper. Mark had told her things, private things, twisted them into something ugly, and now she was using them against me. "I never said that," Mark muttered, but it was weak, a useless attempt to soften the blow. "Yes, you did," Brenda insisted. "You told me she keeps money separate. You told me she refuses to let you see any statements. What was I supposed to think?" I stared at Mark. He avoided my eyes again. That was the moment I realized something that made my stomach drop. This wasn't about curiosity. This wasn't about help or family. Mark had been talking about me behind my back, not just complaining, sharing details he had no right to share. "Why are you telling your mother about my accounts?" I asked quietly. "Why is she the one who knows things about my business that you never even asked me yourself?" Mark finally looked up, but his eyes didn't hold regret. They held something else, something colder. "I just wanted advice," he said. "You were being secretive. I thought maybe Mum could help us figure out what's going on." "What's going on?" I replied. "Is that you're letting your mother break into my purse, take my wallet, go through my cards, and question my work like I owe her answers." Brenda stepped forward again. "If you were transparent, we wouldn't have to look. A stable marriage doesn't have hidden bank accounts." Her words made something click in my mind, a sharp, fleeting realization. "Hidden?" I repeated. "Why would I hide anything?" Neither of them spoke. I watched their faces. Mark looked tense, Brenda looked triumphant. There was a truth hiding behind their silence, a truth I hadn't seen before. "You two know something," I said slowly. "Something you aren't saying." Brenda pursed her lips, then said, "We just want to make sure you're contributing fairly. After all, Mark has been handling most of the bills lately." My heart skipped. "What do you mean handling bills?" I asked. Mark stiffened. Brenda smiled a tiny, satisfied smile. I stepped closer to Mark. Where is my money going, Mark? What have you been telling your mother about me? What aren't you saying? Mark swallowed hard. I could see the panic rising behind his calm mask. He opened his mouth, but the words didn't come. And that silence, more than anything, told me the truth. This wasn't just about my purse or my money. There was something deeper. Something he had been hiding for a long time. Something he was terrified to admit. The lie was bigger than I thought, and I had just started pulling the first thread. Mark's silence did more damage than any words could have. He stood there frozen, his shoulders tense, his eyes darting between me and his mother. The calm act he usually hid behind was slipping, and for the first time that night, I saw real fear on his face. Brenda noticed it too, and she stepped in quickly as if she could shield him from the truth. "Sarah, you're blowing this out of proportion," she said. "Mark didn't want to worry you. He's been stressed, working hard, managing all the household expenses." "What expenses?" I cut in. "I transfer money every month. I pay for groceries. I pay the utilities half the time. What exactly is he managing?" Mark flinched like the question physically hit him. I stared at him, waiting for an explanation. He rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous habit he'd had since college. But now it didn't look nervous. It looked guilty. "I didn't want to bother you with everything," he finally said. "I thought I'd handle it. I thought it would get better on its own." "Get what better?" I demanded. Brenda sucked in a sharp breath as if she knew Mark was about to slip. "Mark," she said softly, warningly. But he didn't look at her this time. His eyes stayed on me, full of something I couldn't quite name. Shame, fear, maybe both. "There were some bills," he said slowly. "Some loans. A few things I didn't think you needed to worry about." My stomach tightened. "What loans?" He hesitated again. Brenda jumped in before he answered. "It's nothing serious. Mark just had a few responsibilities you didn't know about. A man provides for his family, Sarah. Sometimes that means taking on obligations quietly." Quietly. The word echoed, sinking like a stone. "Mark," I said, forcing myself to stay calm. "How much do you owe?" He didn't answer. Instead, he looked at his mother. And that was when I truly understood how deep this went. It wasn't just that he had kept things from me. He had been telling his mother everything, maybe more than he told me. "Tell me how much," I repeated. Mark glanced at the floor. "A little over 20,000. The room spun. $20,000. Debt he had never mentioned. Debt he had hidden. Debt he had pretended didn't exist while letting me believe everything was fine. I felt the shock rise like a wave, but before I could speak, Brenda stepped forward, her voice firm and unbothered, as if she had rehearsed this moment. "That's why we needed to see your cards," she said. "We had to make sure you weren't wasting money when Mark is already drowning in debt trying to keep this home running." My breath caught. "Trying to keep the home running? I pay for half of everything. Where is my money going if he's drowning in debt?" Brenda's expression shifted just slightly, enough for me to see that she had said too much. Mark didn't try to stop her this time. He didn't defend himself. He didn't deny anything. He just stood there, pale and stiff, like a man waiting for a verdict he already knew he deserved. Then a horrible thought hit me. A thought so heavy it made my hands go cold. "Mark," I said, barely able to form the words, "have you been using my transfers? The money I gave for bills. Have you been using it to pay your loans?" Mark finally looked me in the eyes, and the answer was right there. He didn't need to speak. I saw everything. The guilt, the fear, the lie, and the fact that this had been going on for months, maybe longer. Brenda tried to cover for him again. Sarah, couples share responsibilities. Mark shouldn't have to carry everything alone. He wasn't carrying everything, I snapped. He was hiding everything. Mark's voice cracked when he finally spoke. I was going to tell you. I just didn't know how. I thought I could fix it before you found out. Found out? I repeated. Found out what? That you lied to me for months? That your mother knows more about our finances than I do? That she's searching my purse because you've convinced her I'm the problem? Mark opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The silence that followed was the real confession. He had been using my money. He had been hiding debt. He had been talking about me behind my back, and he had let his mother invade my life like she owned it. But something still didn't add up. $20,000 was a lot, but it didn't match the panic in his eyes. There was more, something bigger, something he was terrified to admit. Mark, I said slowly, what else are you hiding? He looked at me the way a man looks at the ground, right before it collapses under him. Brenda grabbed his arm as if she could stop him from speaking. But it was too late. His secret was already breaking the surface. Mark's lips parted like he wanted to speak, but the words wouldn't come. He looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing that whatever he said next would push him over. Brenda clung to his arm, her fingers tight, her voice sharp with warning. Mark, she whispered, don't you dare! But I stepped closer, cutting through her words. No more hiding. No more half-truths. Tell me what else you've been lying about. His chest rose and fell with a deep, shaky breath. He finally pulled his arm out of Brenda's grip, and she looked genuinely startled, as if she'd never seen him push back before. Sarah, he said quietly, it's not just the debt. Then what is it? He closed his eyes for a moment, as if gathering the courage to face himself before facing me. When he opened them, they were filled with a kind of guilt that only comes from betrayal. I used your business. Money, he said finally. Some of it, a few times. The words hit me like a cold slap. My business money, I repeated. You went into my account. He nodded once, a small, miserable nod that didn't soften the blow. How? I demanded. You don't have access. I never gave you the password. He swallowed hard. I guessed it. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. He guessed it. He guessed my password. He went into my business account without my permission, and he took money I earned. For months, maybe longer. Brenda immediately tried to jump in. He didn't steal, he borrowed. A husband has every right to... No, I said sharply. A husband has no right to break into his wife's account. Mark winced. I could feel the anger building in my chest. Not the loud kind, but the deep, steady kind that comes from betrayal layered over betrayal. How much did you take? I asked. Mark stared at the floor again. How much? I repeated, my voice louder this time. He whispered the number so quietly I barely heard it. 8,000. My mouth went dry. $8,000. $8,000 from the one account that belonged entirely to me. The account I kept for my business, my designs, my freelance work, my dream. He had drained it behind my back. I stepped away from him, unable to look at him for a moment. Brenda hurried toward me, trying to fill the space between us with excuses. Sarah, men make mistakes. He was under pressure. He had responsibilities. He thought he could pay it back. He stole from me, I said, cutting her off. He stole my work, my hard-earned money, months of projects. Do you understand what $8,000 means to my business? Brenda lifted her chin, her voice dripping with arrogance. If you had shared everything like a proper wife, he wouldn't have had to do that. I turned slowly to face her. This is not your marriage. This is not your money. This is not your right. But she didn't back down. She stepped even closer, her eyes sharp with the kind of entitlement that had been building for years. You think you're better than us, don't you? She hissed. With your little business and your little income. Mark needed help and you left him drowning, so don't act like you're some victim. I transferred money every month, I said. Where did that go? What was he spending it on? She hesitated, but only for a second. Mark broke first. It wasn't just the loans, he said. Some of the money. It went to Mum. The room froze. Brenda sucked in a breath and grabbed his arm again. Mark, stop talking! But he pulled away from her completely this time. His voice cracked when he spoke again, and the truth spilled out faster than he could stop it. She asked me for help. She said she needed money. She made it sound urgent. I didn't want you to know because you always said we needed boundaries, and I held up my hand to stop him. Are you telling me, I said slowly, that you were giving my money to your mother? Brenda straightened her spine, offended but defiant. I am his mother. If I need support, he provides it. That's how families work. My stomach twisted. So, that's why you cared about my cards. That's why you were digging through my purse. You wanted more. Brenda didn't deny it. She lifted her chin even higher. You have money. I needed money. Mark wanted to help. There is nothing wrong with that. Everything inside me went cold. Mark had betrayed me twice, not just by stealing from my business, but by funneling the money to the one person who had always treated me like I wasn't enough. I stared at him, searching for something. Guilt, regret, a promise of change. But what I saw was a man who had let his mother shape his choices until he didn't know where her authority ended and his marriage began. I trusted you, I said quietly, more than anyone, and you gave my trust away like it meant nothing. Mark opened his mouth to speak, but Brenda spoke first, her voice rising sharper and louder than before. You should be grateful, she snapped. Mark has carried you long enough. It's time you learned your place. The words hung in the air like poison, and that was the moment something inside me finally snapped. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a mistake. This was a betrayal planned and protected by both of them. I wasn't the one who needed to explain anymore. They were. The meeting room fell silent as Harper placed the final document on the table. Her calm voice cut through the tension like a blade. These accounts show every unauthorized transfer your family made, all under the guise of estate maintenance. Evelyn's hands shook. Richard tried to speak, but Harper raised a hand, cold, professional, unbothered. She turned to Ryan. And you knew about this. You let it happen. You thought she'd never find out. Ryan froze. His face lost all colour. Lauren looked between them, horrified. Harper slid a photo across the table, security footage of Ryan's late-night visit to the locked finance room. Proof. Irrefutable. Evelyn gasped. Lauren whispered, You betrayed us? Ryan swallowed hard, unable to deny it anymore. Harper closed the briefcase slowly, almost gracefully. Your entire plan collapses today. No one spoke. No one could. The truth had finally detonated in the centre of the Carter estate. The silence in the grand estate felt heavier than the chandeliers above. Harper stood tall, her expression calm, almost victorious. She placed one final envelope on the table. This is the legal notice. Ownership transfers back to the rightful heir today. Evelyn's breath caught. Lauren covered her mouth in shock. Ryan stumbled back. Harper! Please, we can fix this. Harper looked at him with a cold, steady gaze. You had every chance to fix it. You chose greed. Security stepped forward. Ryan understood. This was the end. Evelyn cried softly. Richard sat frozen, defeated. Harper walked toward the exit, heels echoing on the marble floor, her voice unwavering. The truth always wins. You just never expected it to come from me. As the doors closed behind her, the Carter estate fell into a silence it had never known. The silence of justice finally being served,